Hello, today I'll be talking about 10 of my favorite albums of all time. This will be in no particular order. Also, this is not a top 10. These are just 10 albums that I selected that are, again, some of my favorite albums of all time. But let's go ahead and dive into it, starting off with an album from 1983, Pyromania by Def Leppard. A lot of people love Hysteria. Some people even point to that album as their best. Personally, I disagree with that. That album and High and Dry kind of fight for being my second favorite Def Leppard album, but this one has to be at the top for me. Again, has to be one of my favorite albums of all time. This album really has no skips. Maybe one, Action Not Words has always been my least favorite song on the album, but even with that song, it's not a bad song. It's a good song, but again, never been one of my favorites, but honestly, this is an album that you can listen to from front to back. I mean, a lot of great songs on here. Even the deep cuts are also really good. Or some of the lesser known songs like Die Hard, The Hunter, Billy's Got a Gun, Coming Under Fire, which I think is hands down one of their most underrated songs. And you know what? I even still dig the hits on here like Photograph and Foolin', Rock of Ages. Foolin' is probably a top 5 Def Leppard song for me. I absolutely love Foolin'. Probably my favorite of the singles on the album. But yeah, all around, really great album. Definitely a classic. Now we're moving into the 90s with Faith No More with their album Angel Dust. Now, when you ask fans what their favorite album is from Faith No More, you get different answers. For me, it's Angel Dust. Some people point to The Real Thing as their best. Personally, again, I have to go with this one. I mean, this album all around is just really awesome. Definitely one of the best albums to come from the 90s, in my opinion. Definitely not The Real Thing Part 2. Definitely not that. They definitely sounds like they might have experimented a little bit more with this one, and it definitely paid off. Definitely a really interesting listen. I mean, some of the bigger songs on here are also pretty good, like Midlife Crisis and A Small Victory. A Small Victory probably being maybe my favorite of the singles. The lesser known songs in here are also really good. Kindergarten, Land of Sunshine, Jizz Lobber. I really like Crack Hitler. I think that's a pretty underrated song, kind of overlooked a little bit. Everything's Ruined is also really good. But yeah, all around, really great album. Absolutely love it. Definitely my favorite album from Faith No More. Now I'll be going to Led Zeppelin with their debut album. A lot of people point to Led Zeppelin 4 as their best or one of their best, and I would say it is one of their best. I do agree with that, but I wouldn't say it's at the top for me. The debut has to be at the top for me. I absolutely love this album. It's one of those albums that you can listen from front to back, not a single skip on it. And it also has probably my favorite Led Zeppelin song of all time, Dazed and Confused. I mean, especially the solo is just awesome in that one. All around, really great song. Good Times, Bad Times, another classic on the album. How Many More Times, definitely a killer album closer. Communication Breakdown, another banger. I mean, this album all around is just excellent. Definitely one of the best, maybe one of the best debut albums of all time when it comes to the world of rock. But let's go ahead and move on to the 2000s, specifically 2003. And this album is turning 20 this year. I believe in March it's going to turn 20. But anyways, we were talking about Meteora by Linkin Park. I like it enough to get two versions of it, but yeah. This is one of the, it's got to be at least one of the first albums I ever heard in full. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times I've heard this album in full. I mean, this is an album that I've lived with for over a decade, and maybe longer than that, I don't know, but either way, I absolutely love this album. Definitely my favorite Linkin Park album. A lot of people point to Hybrid Theory as their best. I'd say that's their second best. I think they really improved with this album. I mean, Hybrid Theory is definitely a classic, definitely one of the best things to come from the nu metal era, but this album, I mean, again, has to be at the top for me for Linkin Park. For me, it is their peak, and yeah, all around, I mean, this is an album that's easy to listen to from front to back. It's not too long or anything like that, and you get a decent variety on here also. Nobody's Listening definitely being a fairly unique song on here with, I believe, has a Japanese flute in it, and you also get more hip-hop focus in that song. And even the hits on this album I still really enjoy to this day. Somewhere I Belong, Numb, of course, Breaking the Habit, From the Inside, Faint. I mean, And you get towards the deep cuts on this album. I mean, Figure .09, Don't Stay, Hit the Floor. So many great songs on this album. This is another album for me. No skips. Definitely, honestly, kind of a masterpiece when it comes to nu metal. Definitely one of the best things to come from that genre or from that movement. Such a great album for sure. So let's go ahead and move on to one of the pioneers of thrash metal, also part of the Big Four. And I definitely am really excited to see them live next year with Pantera. And of course, the band I am talking about is Metallica. Their album, Ride the Lightning, their sophomore album. So yeah, with this CD, it's limited to 500 copies. And I believe I got this from a seller that was overseas from eBay, of course. It might have been Portugal, I can't remember. But either way, definitely cool to have. But yeah, Ride the Lightning. I mean, a lot of people point to Master of Puppets as their best. I know a lot of people like the Black Album also. I mean, you definitely get different answers when it comes to asking fans what their favorite Metallica album is. But for me, I have to go with Ride the Lightning. But Master of Puppets seems to be the most popular choice. But Master of Puppets and Injustice for All kind of fight for being my second favorite album from the band, but this one has to be at the top for me. I mean, some people aren't big on track number 6, Escape, but I like this song. Probably the weakest song on here, but even with saying that, that's not really saying much. I still think it's overall a pretty solid song. But yeah, I mean, Fight Fire with Fire, easily one of their best album openers. Definitely a really killer song. Maybe one of the most aggressive cuts on here. You have other great songs or other classics, For Whom the Bell Tolls, of course. Fade to Black, which of their ballads, that one's maybe my favorite. I mean, Unforgiven is great also, but Fade to Black, I mean, when it comes to the ballads, again, might be at the top for me. Trapped Under Ice is also great. Creeping Death, the title track. I mean, you really can't go wrong with any of the songs on here. Definitely a really great album, definitely a classic. And now we're moving to something a bit different, definitely different from the rest of the albums in this video, and that is The Prodigy, The Fat of the Land. Something that for things that I've heard, some things that I've noticed, they seem, when it comes to electronic music, these guys seem to be popular with some metalheads. They're definitely on the more aggressive side of electronic music, you could maybe say, or at least in their earlier days, but I don't know. I really dig this album a lot. I mean, I'm not heavily into electronic music. I know there's a specific genre for what these guys are called. I think it's like big beat or something like that, which I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about, but either way, this album, I mean, I discovered these guys, I don't know, like a year or two ago. I think it might have been 2 or 3 years ago, but either way, this album definitely their best, and I'm sure some fans of the Prodigy would probably agree with me on that. I mean, Smack My Bitch Up, Breathe, Serial Thriller, Firestarter. So many great songs on here. Can't go wrong with any of the songs on here. So many great songs. You have the song Funky Shit, which is mostly an instrumental and honestly a banger. A song that's grown over time to be maybe one of my favorites on here. I mean, the singles are still great all these years later. I mean, absolutely love this album. And if you haven't heard this album, definitely check it out. Maybe one of the best things to come from the 90s, or one of the best albums to come from the 90s in general. But now we're moving to the album that's playing in the background right now. Not sure if you can hear it right now, but the album that I am talking about is Californication by Red Hot Chili Peppers. So yeah, I got the regular version and I got the Blue Era version. I think that's what it's called. I could be wrong, but either way, definitely cool to have both versions. But yeah, absolutely love this album. Definitely my favorite from the band. A lot of people point to Blood Sugar Sex Magic as their best. There was a time where Mother's Milk was actually my favorite from the band, but over time this has grown to be my favorite and has grown to be one of my favorite albums of all time. Absolutely love this album. I mean, for how many tracks this album has, I mean, I think the album does a well enough job for keeping you engaged through the whole listen. I mean, so many great songs. The hits are still great all this time later. Californication, the title track, one of their best songs in my opinion. Scar Tissue is also great. Around the World, probably one of their best album openers. When I saw them live, they opened up with that song. This Velvet Glove, I think, is hands down one of their most overlooked songs. I mean, when it comes to their more melodic cuts, that one is definitely, in my opinion, one of their best. I absolutely love that song. I like Dirt, one of the more funky songs on here. I really like that one too. Short but fun. Purple Stain's also really good, especially if you like the more funky side of the band. That song is definitely another standout for me, especially when it comes to the second half. Get on Top's also really good. Other Side, Parallel Universe. I mean, so many great songs. A lot of the stuff on here is definitely some of the band's best work. Let's go ahead and move on to the next album, and that is Moving Pictures by Rush. So yeah, I love it enough to have 3 different versions of it, and yeah, this album is just, I mean, when we're talking about the world of progressive rock, I mean, this is definitely up there as one of the best things to come from that genre or that movement. I mean, this album is just so good. I mean, you definitely get a variety of answers when it comes to what people say is the best Rush album, but I have to go with this one. I mean, you could go with 2112, Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, and some others, maybe Signals, but I don't know. This album is just so good. Not a single skip on it. I mean, the Epic on here, The Camera Eye, another really good song. Of course, you have some of their big songs on here, like Tom Sawyer and Limelight. But even the lesser known songs in here are also really good, like Witch Hunt and Vital Signs. I mean, this is just one of those albums that you can listen to front to back without skipping anything. There isn't really anything on here that I would consider filler, honestly. I mean, this album, in my opinion, honestly, kind of a masterpiece. And when it comes to rock music in general, I think it's kind of an essential, especially to have in the collection if you collect CDs or vinyl or anything like that. Love this album. Now we're moving to some grunge with Soundgarden with their album Bad Motor Finger. This might be my favorite album from that whole grunge movement. I mean, you also have other great albums, of course, like Nevermind and Facelift, Dirt, and 10 Verses and some others, but this album, I mean, this album is maybe at the top for me again when it comes to grunge. I mean, I absolutely love this album. Chris Cornell's vocal performance, rest in peace, excellent on here, especially in songs like Holy Water, Rusty Cage, Outshine, Slaves and Bulldozers. I mean, in my opinion, the best vocalist from this time in music. I mean, I know some people would point to Lane Staley as the best one, and I totally understand that. He'd probably be second for me, but yeah, Chris Cornell, absolutely love his voice, especially again with this album. Some of my favorites on here: Rusty Cage, Outshine, which is definitely one of their best songs, Jesus Christ Pose, Slaves and Bulldozers, Room 1,000 Years Wide has to be one of my favorite Soundgarden songs. Absolutely love that song, especially the riff work. Somewhere and Holy Water are also really good. I think the album closes off in a pretty killer note with the song New Damage, which I think is maybe my favorite when it comes to their album closer. That's maybe my favorite. But yeah, all around, really great album. And now for the final album for this video, Fair Warning by Van Halen. This is another band where if you ask fans what their favorite album is from the band, you get different answers. Some people point to 1984 or the self-titled debut, but I have to go with this one. I mean, this album might have some of the band's heaviest work, especially in the guitar department, but yeah, I absolutely love this album. Has to be at the top for me. Mean Street, Dirty Movies, Hear About It Later. You have the big song on here, Unchained, which is definitely one of their best singles. So This Is Love is also pretty good. Push Comes to Shove, a bit of a slower song that I also really like and grown to like more and more with time also. You get to the last 2 songs, which a lot of people seem to skip sometimes or somewhat kind of overlooked, you could say. I mean, I wouldn't consider these songs some of the best stuff on here, but I do like the last 2 songs on here, Sunday Afternoon in the Park, which is an instrumental. I believe Eddie uses some kind of keyboard in this song, in this instrumental. You have One Foot Out the Door, which is a short song, and overall, kind of cool, but yeah. Absolutely love this album. Definitely my favorite Van Halen album. So yeah, Those are 10 of my favorite albums of all time. Let me know your thoughts on my albums that I chose here. Let me know some of your favorite albums of all time, or some of your favorites, some of my favorites that I mentioned here in this video. Let me know some of your favorite songs from these albums and all that good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and like, subscribe. Have a nice day, and take care.